He fought 61 duels. He never lost once. Not one. Most men spend their entire lives trying to win arguments, trying to prove themselves in rooms full of people who don't matter, trying to look strong in front of people who aren't even watching. Musashi spent his life trying to master himself. That's the difference. He wasn't just a swordsman. He wasn't just a warrior. He was the only man in recorded history to develop a complete philosophy, a full system of life built entirely from the silence between life and death. And before he died, alone in a cave with nothing left to prove, he wrote it all down. He left you a blueprint. Most men will never read it. They're too comfortable, too distracted, too afraid of what it might demand from them. This video is for the ones who aren't. Stay with me for the next 30 minutes. Everything changes. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Chose the Sword. He was born with nothing, no protection, no status, no one coming to save him. His mother died before he could remember her face. His father, a warrior himself, was absent from the moment it mattered most. The boy was left in a Buddhist temple, raised by an uncle who had chosen silence over the sword. Most boys in that position become small. Musashi became undefeatable, but not for the reasons you think. It wasn't rage. It wasn't a hunger to prove something. It wasn't the wound of abandonment driving him forward like some broken man searching for what he lost. It was clarity. From the very beginning, Musashi saw something most men never see, that the life you're handed is not the life you're required to keep, that hardship is not a sentence, it's a curriculum. He was 13 years old the first time he understood this completely. A traveling samurai named Arima Kihei posted a public challenge board. He was looking for someone to fight, someone to beat, someone to add to the long list of men who had already knelt before him. Nobody answered. Nobody except a 13-year-old boy with no formal training, no clan backing him, and no rational reason to believe he could win. He didn't just answer the challenge. He killed the man. Not with superior technique, not with a weapon forged by a master. He knocked Arima Kihei to the ground and beat him to death. Raw, relentless, completely committed. And when it was over, he wasn't celebrated. He wasn't rewarded. He walked away alone, the same as he arrived. That moment tells you everything about who Musashi was. He didn't fight to be seen. He didn't fight to be praised. He fought because something inside him demanded to know what he was made of. And the only way to answer that question was to put everything on the line and find out. Most men never ask that question. They spend their entire lives managing risk, calculating loss, choosing the path that guarantees they won't be embarrassed, won't be humiliated, won't be exposed. Musashi chose exposure at age 13, and it set the course for everything that followed. By 16, he was fighting in one of the largest battles in Japanese history, Sekigahara, an entire war. He was a boy among tens of thousands of soldiers. He ended up on the losing side. His army collapsed around him. Men who had trained their entire lives died in hours. He survived. He walked off that battlefield alone into the wilderness and kept moving. No master, no clan, no map, just a sword, a willingness to suffer, and a philosophy beginning to take shape inside him. One hard lesson at a time. He wandered for years, fighting, observing, testing himself against every opponent he could find. Some were trained warriors, some were street fighters, some were masters with decades of experience and students of their own. He beat them all. And here is what most people miss about Musashi's early life. Every man who came to destroy him gave him something. The samurai who was faster taught him that speed was irrelevant if the timing was wrong. The swordsman who was stronger taught him that strength alone breaks under the right angle. The master who was more decorated taught him that reputation is armor, and armor slows you down. He didn't just survive his opponents, he absorbed them. He turned every near defeat into a new layer of understanding. Every scar became a lesson he carried forward. Every man who pushed him to the edge showed him exactly where his edge was, and then he moved it further. You don't build an undefeated life in comfort. You build it in fire. By the time Musashi reached 30, he had fought and won over 30 duels to the death, more than most warriors see in an entire lifetime. He had crossed the country alone, survived wars, walked away from every single encounter he entered. And something changed in him. He stopped fighting to win. He started fighting to understand. That shift, from victory as a destination to understanding as the path, is where Musashi's philosophy was truly born. That is when the wandering swordsman began to become something rarer, something the world had never quite seen before. Not just a warrior, a man who had used the edge of death to cut away everything that wasn't essential. What was left was the blueprint, and he spent the rest of his life writing it down for you. Chapter 2. The Way, Strategy over Strength. Here is what no one tells you about Musashi. He wasn't the biggest man in the room. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't always the most technically trained. He walked into duels against masters who had spent decades refining a single style under a single teacher inside a single school. He beat them anyway, every single time. And the reason had nothing to do with his sword arm. It had everything to do with what was happening inside his mind before the duel even began. Musashi understood something his opponents never did, that the fight is never really about the fight. The sword is just the last step in a sequence that started long before the blades were drawn. By the time steel touched steel, Musashi had already won. He had won in the silence, in the stillness, in the space most men never enter. He called it the way. Not a technique, not a style, not a set of moves to be memorized and repeated, a way of seeing. Every opponent who stood across from him came carrying the same invisible weapons: ego, attachment to their own reputation, fear of losing, desire to win. All of it clouding the mind, all of it slowing them down in the moments that demanded total clarity. Musashi came with none of that. He came empty, and an empty mind is the most dangerous weapon ever developed. He proved this most visibly through his invention of Niten Ishi Renuk, the two-sword style, the technique that made him famous. Most men look at two swords and think double the offense, more power, more threat. That's not why he developed it. He developed it because mastery demands the elimination of weakness. One hand was dominant, one hand was trained, the other neglected, conventional, following the path of least resistance the way most men follow the path of least resistance in their entire lives. He refused to accept that. He trained both hands, both sides, both eyes. He made himself complete in the way that most men never bother to become. Because becoming complete is uncomfortable. It requires confronting your weaknesses directly, naming them, working them until they no longer exist. Most men protect their weaknesses instead. They build a life around avoiding the thing they can't do well. They specialize in their strengths and quietly abandon everything else. And then they wonder why they feel incomplete. Musashi had no patience for incomplete men, including himself. But the sword technique, the physical innovation, was only the surface. The deeper philosophy lived in the fifth scroll of the Book of Five Rings. He called it Ku, the void, not emptiness as in absence, not nothingness as in defeat. The void as in a mind so clear, so free of noise, so stripped of ego and outcome and fear that it can respond to reality as it actually is, not as you wish it were, not as you fear it might be, as it is. An empty cup can be filled. A full cup overflows and is wasted. Musashi kept himself empty, always ready, always clear. Now stop and consider what that demands of a modern man, because you are surrounded every hour of every day by noise designed to fill you. notifications, opinions. Oh, rage. Other people's emergencies dressed up as your responsibility. The algorithm feeding you the next thing before you finish thinking about the last thing. You are never empty. You are never still. And so, when the moment comes, when the duel arrives, not with a sword but with a decision that actually matters, you are not ready. You are already full of everything that has nothing to do with that moment. The man who cannot sit in silence cannot win in the storm. Musashi understood this at 30 years old. On a country road, between duels, alone, he began to build the philosophy in that silence, rule by rule, principle by principle, testing each one in combat, refining each one in solitude. By the time he was ready to write it all down formally, he had 1 week left to live. And he wrote 21 rules, not one more, not one less. The Dokudo, his final code. His final code. This is where the blueprint becomes personal. Chapter 3, the Dokudo 21, laws written before death. He was dying, he knew it. His body was shutting down from what historians believe was thoracic cancer. He had retreated deep into the Reigando Cave, a mountain cave in Kyushu, Japan, with nothing but a brush, ink, and everything he had learned across 60 years of survival. He had 1 week left. Most men spend their final days looking back, mourning what they didn't do, clinging to the people they love, afraid of what comes next. Musashi picked up his brush and wrote 21 rules, not for himself. He had already lived them, every single one. He wrote them for you. He called it the Dokudo, the way of walking alone. And alone is exactly what it demands, not isolated, not broken, not running from the world, alone as in complete within yourself, needing nothing from the outside that you cannot generate from within. 21 rules. We're going to walk through the ones that cut deepest. Rule 1. Accept everything just the way it is. Not because you are weak, not because you have surrendered, because resistance to reality is the single greatest thief of human energy. The man who spends his strength fighting what already is has none left for building what could be. Accept it, then move. Rule 2. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Comfort is not the destination. Comfort is the sedative. The man who organizes his entire life around feeling good will spend his entire life avoiding the very things that would make him great. Pleasure is a reward, never a goal. Rule 6. Do not regret what you have done. Read that again. Not make peace with your mistakes. Not forgive yourself and move forward. Not be kind to the man you used to be. No, do not regret, because regret is a lie. It tells you that you had more information then than you actually did. It judges yesterday's decisions with today's understanding. That is not honesty. That is self-punishment dressed as reflection. You made the decision you were capable of making with who you were. Now you are someone else. Move. Rule 9. Resentment and complaint are appropriate neither for oneself nor others. This one is the one most men fail, because resentment feels like power. It feels like you are holding someone accountable. It feels like refusal to let them off the hook. But resentment lives in you, not in them. The man you resent is not carrying the weight. You are, every single day, in your chest, behind your eyes, in the way you reach for your phone at 11 p.m. to replay an old argument in your head. Musashi had enemies who tried to kill him. He did not resent them. He moved. Rule 17. Do not fear death. Not because death isn't real, not because life isn't precious, because fear of death is fear of everything. The man who is afraid to die is afraid to fully live. He pulls back. He hesitates. He lets the moment pass because the risk feels too large. He chooses survival over significance every single time. Musashi chose significance over and over, against every odd. Rule 21. Never stray from the way. The last rule. the only one that contains all the others. Because this is the truth that every one of these 21 laws is building toward. The way is not a destination, it is not a mood. It is not something you follow when it's convenient and abandon when it's hard. The way is a daily decision, made in the moments no one sees, in the early morning before the world demands anything from you, in the quiet decision between the comfortable option and the right one, in the choice to keep going when every reasonable voice inside you says stop. That is the way, and the only way to walk it is to walk it. Every day, without exception, without applause, without anyone watching. The way Musashi walked it for 60 years until he had nothing left to give. And then he gave you this. Chapter 4. The Duel at Ganryujima, the greatest moment in samurai history. April 13th, 1612. A small island off the coast of Japan, Funijima, later renamed Ganryujima, the island of the Ganryu school, in honor of the man who died there. This is the duel that history remembers, the one that gets written down in textbooks, the one that gets painted, retold, mythologized, the moment that turned a wandering warrior into a legend that has outlasted empires. And it almost didn't happen. Musashi was late, not a few minutes late, hours late. His opponent, Sasaki Kojiro, waited on that beach in the full heat of the morning sun, surrounded by witnesses, officials, and followers. A man of reputation, a man of pride, a man who had built his entire identity around the belief that he was the greatest swordsman alive. He waited, and grew furious. Kojiro was no ordinary opponent. He was called the demon of the western provinces. He wielded an odachi, a sword so long most men couldn't lift it cleanly, let alone fight with it. He had developed a technique called Tsubame Goshi, the swallow counter. A strike so fast, so devastatingly timed, that it had never once been successfully defended against. No one had beaten him, no one had come close, and yet here he stood, on a beach, waiting, for a man who wasn't there. Now here is what most people miss about this moment. Musashi was not late because he overslept. He was not late because he was afraid. He was not late because he lacked respect for the duel or the man he was about to face. He was late because he had already won. He understood, with absolute clarity, what waiting does to a proud man, what the sun does to composure, what silence does to certainty. Every minute Kojiro spent on that beach watching the horizon, his stillness cracked, his focus frayed. His pride, the very pride that made him dangerous, became the weapon Musashi was using against him. The mind breaks before the body. Musashi knew this. He had built his entire life around this truth, and on the boat ride to the island, he carved a sword from a wooden oar. Not steel, not his blades, not the refined weapons of a master swordsman walking into the most important duel of his life. Wood, roughly cut, unfinished, barely shaped. When Kojiro saw it, he threw his scabbard into the sea in pure contempt. A theatrical gesture, the act of a man who intended to end this quickly and decisively. Musashi watched the scabbard hit the water and said this, "You have already lost, Kojiro." A man who throws away his scabbard has no intention of leaving the battlefield alive. The duel lasted seconds. Musashi moved. Kojiro unleashed the swallow counter, the technique no one had ever survived. Musashi leaned, barely, precisely. The blade passed so close it cut the cloth tied around his forehead. The wooden oar struck Kojiro across the skull. The greatest swordsman in Japan, the demon of the western provinces, fell on the sand, and Musashi walked back to his boat. No celebration, no bow to the crowd, no moment of triumph held up for the witnesses to remember. He had prepared in the dark. He had executed in the light. He had left without needing anyone to confirm what had just happened. That is mastery, not the victory, the silence after it, Because Musashi understood what most men will spend their entire lives learning too late. The real duel is never with another man. It is always with yourself. And every duel you will ever face, every moment that demands everything you have, has already been decided by the work you did when no one was watching. Win there first, and you will never lose out here. Chapter 5. The Legacy. What Musashi left behind and what it demands of you. Miyamoto Musashi died on May 19, 1645. He was 62 years old, alone in a cave, at peace. He left behind no empire, no dynasty, no army that fought in his name, no gold, no land, no heirs who carried his bloodline into the next generation. He left behind words, 21 rules, 5 scrolls, a philosophy carved out of 60 years of solitude, combat, and relentless self-examination. And somehow, nearly 400 years later, those words are still here. They have outlasted the generals who commanded armies, the emperors who ruled nations, the warlords who burned entire provinces to consolidate power. All of them gone, reduced to footnotes in books that no one opens. Musashi remains, because power built on force expires the moment the force does. But truth, real truth, tested in fire, refined in silence, lived without compromise. Truth does not expire. It finds you. It found you today. And now the question that matters, the only question that has ever mattered, is what you are going to do with it. Because this is where most men stop. They consume the philosophy. They feel the weight of it. They recognize something true in it. Something that speaks directly to the part of them they have been quietly betraying for years. The part that knows they are capable of more. The part that got smaller every time they chose comfort over growth, every time they chose applause over integrity, every time they told themselves tomorrow. They feel all of that, and then they close the video and nothing changes. Musashi did not write the Dokudo so you could feel inspired for 11 minutes. He wrote it as a demand, a standard, a mirror held up so close to your face that you cannot look away from what is actually there. Look at your life, not the version of your life you present to others, not the story you tell yourself at night to make the decisions feel justified. The actual life, the daily reality of how you spend your hours, your energy, your attention. Is it the life of a man who cannot be moved? Or is it the life of a man being moved constantly by everything around him, by other people's opinions, by fear, by comfort, by the slow erosion of standards that happens so gradually you barely notice until one day you look up and don't recognize the man in the mirror? Musashi would not accept that. He would not accept it from himself, and he would not accept it from you. His legacy is not a story to admire from a distance. It is an instruction. Walk alone when the crowd is wrong. Accept reality without flinching. Eliminate weakness methodically, beginning with the weaknesses you are most attached to. Do not regret. Do not resent. Do not fear the end. And never, not once, stray from the way. The way that Musashi walked was not comfortable. It was not social. It was not designed to make him liked, accepted, or celebrated in his lifetime. He wandered. He slept in fields. He ate poorly. He had no home, no wife, no children, no master. He had something rarer, himself, completely, without compromise. And when death came, he did not bargain. He did not panic. He sat in a cave, picked up a brush, and wrote the last thing he had left to give. That is the life of a man who finished, not finished as in done. Finished as in complete. A man who left nothing essential unlived, who extracted everything the years had to offer, who looked at his own reflection on the last morning and recognized exactly who was looking back. That is what is being asked of you now. Not perfection, completion, the version of you that holds the line when everything inside you says break. The version that keeps building when the results don't come. The version that walks away from what is easy because you have decided, clearly, finally, without negotiation, that easy was never what you were made for. Musashi spent 60 years becoming that man. You have today. Start there.